Over the years, there have been countless bands who decided to switch things up and change their musical styles. But those changes were not always for the better. Some fans can appreciate it when their favorite bands change their styles, while some think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Regardless of what fans think, change is inevitable, and most of the time artists like to try new things and see how they fare. It's pretty easy to switch lanes and head off into a new creative direction, but at the end of the day, the question will always be, did it work out well? So which bands changed for the better, and which bands changed for the worse? Keep watching as we check out the 10 bands that tried to go experimental and how it worked out for their careers and their fan base. Bad Religion, Into the Unknown. Melodic hardcore innovators Bad Religion briefly abandoned their signature punk sound when they decided to take a creative detour for their second album, 1983's Into the Unknown. Compared to their debut album, How Could Hell Be Any Worse?, the album had zero touches of punk and instead finds the band getting in touch with their prog rock side, with songs that were longer, more complex, and driven by synthesizers. Critics found it enjoyable, but the band and their fans view it today as a wrong turn. Realizing their misstep, Bad Religion returned to their punk sound for future releases and never looked back since. Fleetwood Mac, 1975. When legendary rock band Fleetwood Mac began in the late 60s, they were primarily a British blues band. But the band's founder, Peter Green, left in 1970 when the band was transitioning into a more pop-oriented style. The transition was completed with the introduction of guitarist Lindsey Buckingham and new vocalist Stevie Nicks. The new lineup released the self-titled Fleetwood Mac in 1975, which also happens to be the band's second self-titled album after their debut album with Peter Green. The album kick-started a new era for the band and a string of successful albums. From then on, Fleetwood Mac achieved popularity in Britain and the US market, becoming a much bigger act than the Peter Green era and turning it into one of the world's best-selling bands. Muse, Simulation Theory. Muse went all 80s for their 2018 album Simulation Theory. And while it sounds interesting on paper, the final product leaves much to be desired. The musical style of Muse has always been unique, and while it's an eclectic mix of different influences, their sound is nonetheless instantly identifiable. For Simulation Theory, Muse decided to up the ante regarding their experimentation. The record drew from 80s-era synth-pop and electronica to make it look and sound like an album that came from that era. It also lacked the use of an overarching concept that ran throughout an entire album, something that Muse was known for doing in many of their albums. So instead, Simulation Theory sounds like an 80s synth-pop playlist with splashes of Muse sprinkled all over it. It was different, but it didn't have enough of the stomp or sophistication that made their prior albums great. Paramore. When the Farrell brothers left Paramore at the end of 2010, fans wondered how the band would bounce back, if they even could. Paramore was one of the most recognizable bands during the emo craze in the mid-2000s, and they had just lost two members who were integral in shaping their sound. In 2013, Paramore staged a comeback with their self-titled album. But this was a different Paramore. Gone were the pounding rhythms and heavy guitars that characterized their first three albums. Instead, the band chose to expand their creative range and incorporated synth-pop and power-pop influences over punk and emo to form their new sound. It worked, and the album garnered praise from both fans and critics, with some saying that it's the best album Paramore have ever released. Although the band still plays songs from its emo era live, future albums followed the musical standard that their self-titled album set. Slayer, Diabolus in Musica. If there's any album that proves that Slayer and nu metal don't mix, it would be this one. For their 1998 album, Diabolus in Musica, the band retained the lyrical subject matter that made them controversial since they started. Death, gore, religion, war, Satan, and the like. However, the band's style underwent a significant change. Around the time of its recording and release, nu metal was taking the world by storm, and its influence can be heard on Diabolus in Musica. Speed was replaced with groove-oriented riffs and beats, the guitars were down-tuned, and Tom Araya came the closest he ever did to rapping on some songs. The band can be admired for trying something new, but Slayer fans expect to hear Slayer, and Slayer was not Korn. Deftones, White Pony. Deftones burst on the scene in the mid-90s with a sound that combined elements of nu metal, post-hardcore, alternative rock, and even shoegaze. Their first two albums, Adrenaline and Around the Fur, followed this style for the most part. But even then, it was apparent that Deftones are more capable than they sounded, and for their third album, White Pony, the band got to unfurl its musical wings a bit wider. From trip-hop to post-rock to prog, Deftones took a bit of everything and merged it with their sound to create a new style that's all their own. Fans and critics refer to the album as a milestone for the band, praising it for its maturity and experimentation. The album gave fans a taste of what Deftones are truly capable of, and since then, the band has more or less applied the influences found on this album to their future releases. Korn, The Path of Totality. Dubstep became a big thing during the early 2010s, with some comparing it to metal due to its heavy sound. Fans took notice and helped the style become popular, and even musicians acknowledged the new genre's rise, including nu metal pioneers Korn. In 2011, Korn collaborated with producers such as Skrillex for their album The Path of Totality, which was essentially a dubstep record. Reaction to the album was mixed. Some fans praised the band for trying something new, while others panned the album's direction. Ultimately, more fans and critics gravitated towards the latter view, and Korn never tried flirting with dubstep again. Eventually, the genre's popularity waned down, so had Korn kept riding the trend, they could have sank alongside it when its popularity started dying. Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. Most fans know Pantera as a group of uncompromising alcohol-fueled metalheads, and their revolutionary style of heavy metal influenced countless bands. But what many might not know is that the Pantera they know and love actually started as an 80s hair metal band. When Pantera first got together, their style had more similarity to the likes of Rat and Motley Crue than Black Sabbath and Judas Priest. Unfortunately, the 80s weren't kind to Pantera despite them riding the era's hair metal wave. When vocalist Phil Anselmo came into the picture, their style began taking a heavier route, culminating in the release of their 1990 album Cowboys from Hell. Here, Pantera shed the last remnants of their glam years and adopted an in-your-face style in terms of image and music. The album signaled the true arrival of Pantera as a force to be reckoned with and turned them into one of metal's most popular and influential bands. Judas Priest, Turbo. Throughout its 50-plus year career, the metal gods Judas Priest adapted to the ever-changing conditions of heavy metal. As the genre evolved, so did they, becoming heavier as the years went by. But for their 1986 album Turbo, Priest tried their luck with the more accessible style of hair metal. The band experimented with lots of synthesizers and more grounded subject matter such as romance in an attempt to keep up with the times, as well as sell more records, of course. From a commercial standpoint, it worked, as it was a certified platinum record a year after its release. But Priest's most ardent fans consider it one of the band's weaker albums. Vocalist Rob Halford has even acknowledged Turbo as the love/hate Judas Priest album. The band never toned down their heavy metal again after this album. Metallica. Metallica's self-titled album, released in 1991, is significant for two reasons. First, it's their best-selling album and is credited with breaking them into the mainstream. And second, it's considered the album that distinguished between old Metallica and new Metallica, dividing fans into those who viewed the band as sellouts and those who stayed faithful to them. During the 80s, Metallica pioneered the metal subgenre of thrash, characterized by blistering speeds and aggressive musicianship. But in the 90s, Metallica made drastic changes to their style. Their songs became slower and more straightforward, and a departure from the complex song structures the band incorporated in their earlier albums. As such, Metallica became more commercially accessible, which did not sit well with a large portion of their fan base. Still, the Black Album, as it's commonly known, produced some of Metallica's most popular songs, such as Enter Sandman, Sad But True, The Unforgiven, and Nothing Else Matters. So, is this change in style for Metallica a success or a failure? The short answer is it depends on who's being asked. The only constant in life is change, so the saying goes. Bands that stand the test of time are bound to change styles, some more drastically than others. But changing styles gives varying results, as demonstrated by these 10 bands. Then again, they wouldn't know what changes would work and what won't if they don't even try.